Hi, good morning. My name is Cara Wallace. I'm the middle school principal, and I am also the chairperson of the Wellbeing Committee here at ISS. Wellbeing of our students, wellbeing of our staff and faculty, and obviously you doing the morning connections, obviously helping with your well-being here and at home with your children. It's very well known that learning, academic learning, is absolutely connected to emotion, and students who are emotional, stressed, tired, no academic learning will take place. Until we have happy, relaxed students who look forward to coming to school, feeling cared for and supported at school and obviously at home, that's when you have the absolute nice path to good learning. The brain will shut down if emotion is too high, and so therefore no learning can take place. So as teachers and as parents, what can we do to help our children and our students be relaxed and calm, feeling happy and ready and primed to learn? And that's where we segue into our guest speaker for today. So I'll let Catherine, and I'll thank Catherine for organising these wonderful events, and I'll let Catherine introduce our guest speaker today. Hope you enjoy it.
Good morning again. Today we welcome Dr. Jude Nielsen. Jude is a UK-trained charter counselling psychologist. Got that down. And she has a particular interest in supporting families and helping them grow together. And Jude has been doing a number of speaking gigs around town. I know she was at PwC and I believe in as well. Yeah. So she's got a few speaking opportunities happening over the course of this year. And so we're really delighted that you've made a pit stop here at ISS to talk about supporting children with their emotional development, specifically addressing some anxiety concerns and having some strategies to help listen and talk together as a family and grow together. So thank you for coming.
Thank you. It's a real pleasure to be here. I would just a little bit more about myself before I start. Can everybody hear me though? Okay. So I am as Catherine said, I'm a qualified counselling psychologist, which is a form of applied psychology. I am also a qualified teacher, and I've done some supply teaching here in ISS and at BIS as well, so I know the school a little bit. I have a private psychology practice here in Stavanger, which takes three forms. So I see individuals for therapy, I do some talks, such as this morning, and at the moment I'm running some workshops that are hosted through the British School but are actually open to the community. They're a parenting course that I'm leading there. I can say a little bit more about that at the end if anybody's particularly interested, because we have one course going at the moment, but I hope to do another one after Easter. This is a topic that I am very interested in from both personal and professional perspectives. As a parent of one and with another on the way, it's something that I think is hugely, hugely important, and is something that comes up in my professional work a great deal. It's something I'm really very, very interested in. This is what I'm going to be talking about this morning. What is emotional development? So what are you thinking about, basically? The stages of emotional development, and you have a sheet on the table in front of you that I will give you a little bit of time to look at in more detail as we go through. So don't worry about studying it too carefully now. We will have some time to look at it. And then the big question of how to actively support your children's emotional development. When to be concerned and what to do if you are concerned, and then time for questions at the end. So we have time for questions at the end. If I say something that doesn't make sense, or you don't understand, or it just needs clarification, please do ask, okay? Otherwise, there's a couple of spaces where there might be a good time for questions, but otherwise if we can save questions for the end, then we'll bring it all together. So, what is emotional development? So emotions are the mental states that involve feelings, psychological and physiological changes these produce, and the behaviour that accompanies them. They are a substantial part of babies, infants and children's lives from the very moment of birth. And so we're thinking today about the development of these mental states, children's understanding of them, their ability to communicate them and manage them, and their ability to understand them in other people as well. So there are lots of terms that you may be familiar with, that you may have come across in this area, such as emotional intelligence, which was a term coined by the writer Daniel Goleman in a book of that name. And it's really about the ability to identify, to assess, and to control one's own emotions and to understand that in others. And it takes this idea of emotional intelligence and it thinks of it in a similar way to thinking about academic or cognitive intelligence, that emotional intelligence is another form of intelligence. Emotional literacy is a term you might be familiar with, and that takes that idea of emotional intelligence into a more educational context. So it's more about how we learn it, how schools, for example, can help children develop those skills and develop the application of those skills so that they can appropriately express emotions. You might have heard the term emotional competence, which again comes from those two, about being competent at understanding, expressing and managing one's own emotions and those of others around us. And emotional regulation is the essential social skill in being able to respond to, again, one's own and other people's emotions. And anybody living with toddlers will know that emotional regulation is a key developmental task that we have to learn. Anybody living with teenagers, who can be very like toddlers, will know that that is, again, another time, another period where learning emotional regulation of all these new and very different feelings and experiences comes to the fore once again, and teenagers need to be supported in that process of learning emotional regulation in actually a very similar way that toddlers do. Something we can come back to. And then you may be familiar with the term emotional resilience, which is about being able to bounce back from adversity. It's that belief in one's own competence, one's own skills, and one's own ability to get through difficult times. And that doesn't mean get through necessarily on your own. It might be about being able to ask for support, that you are feeling strong enough to be able to ask for support. And these are all very important parts of this very broad term of emotional development. And they're important because it helps children to develop, it helps children to reach their potential. It helps children to learn the emotional development, and it's often referred to as social and emotional development because the development of that managing emotions is so closely tied up with the ability and the development of social skills, but it's also it's also tied up and overlaps and impacts with that ability to learn, so the development of cognitive skills, the development of physical skills. They're so closely tied up and they overlap and interact with each other all the way through our lives to help our children into well-rounded, healthy individuals. So hopefully you've all had a look at this little girl who I think displays a very healthy range of emotions here. I just thought it was quite sweet. So the stages of emotional development. As I said, emotional development begins right from birth, from the very moment of birth, and it continues throughout our lifetime. I talked very briefly about toddlers, the toddler years being a very key stage of emotional learning, emotional regulation particularly. And then as there are different challenges and different changes, there are other demands. And then the teenage years, again, being a particularly key stage in learning about emotional regulation and in terms of emotional development. There are several key theories or key psychological theories in this area, particularly by Erikson and attachment theories. But the common theme of the different approaches is the stress on the real importance of early relationships in the development of emotional understanding and regulation. So it's been very, very well established in research that loving, safe, consistent and affectionate relationships form the foundation of emotional development, or through which emotional development progresses. But nothing in emotional development, in child development, is inevitable. So just because a child may experience some really quite severe difficulties in the very early years does not make it inevitable that they will suffer difficulties later. With the right kind of support and the right kind of supportive environment, children can make huge developments. So it's really important to remember that although the ideal is that very loving, caring, supportive, safe environment, that if a child has missed out on that for whatever reason, later support and later care and affection and love can help them make huge developments. There's lots of focus on the early years because obviously that's when children are learning the very beginnings of this and making huge progress and huge developments in the first couple of years. And then again slightly later. What I'd like you to do is just have a couple of minutes to look at the handout in front of you. There's a couple more at the front here I'll pass around. But this is really a very nice breakdown of this is a really nice summary of the milestones. So rather than present you with 10 different theories, I thought actually it's more interesting as a parent to see perhaps what your child might be doing. And I want you, as you look through it, just to remember that all children are different. They develop at their own pace. It's not a competition, it's not a race. These are things that they may experience at around this age. So just take a few minutes, think about where your children are, think about what might be coming next for them, and just have a little look. And if anybody's got any questions at this point about this particular bit, I'm happy to take them. Can everybody see one at least?
So distancing from you, and then start trying to discover your own strengths and weakness, which can say self-centered, impulsive, or shows pride in success, never interested in dating
Yeah, that's true.
Does anybody have any questions about this bit, about these stages or milestones, as you might call them? Okay, you keep hold of these. We will come back to them and we can have a little bit more time to look at them and do take them home as well. What I want to move on to think about is how particularly you can support your children's emotional development. So what can you be doing as parents to support them? And I break this down into 3 stages that we're going to go through in quite a lot of detail and do a couple of tasks around as well. So the first is encouraging identification of emotions, so recognising and labelling emotions. The second is encouraging expression of emotions, so encouraging your children to talk about how they're feeling and doing that yourself in a way of modelling it for them. And then the third, and perhaps the most challenging, and also the longest term change, encouraging positive coping of emotions. So the first 2 stages are things that you can introduce immediately. The third stage, it takes longer to see the impact of. So, to break that down into more detail, I have another handout and there's 1 each of these. So I'll put a pile on each table. If you could take one and if there's spare, pass them on to the next table. And we're just looking at this first side with all the bullet points on it. Okay, so just to go through this in a little bit more detail. The first stage then, as I said, is about recognising and labelling feelings. So it's about talking about emotions with your children at whatever opportunity you can find. It doesn't mean bringing it into every single conversation. So when a child says that they didn't like their packed lunch necessarily, it's not necessarily going to be the appropriate time, but it's about bringing it in when you can. I've got a few books at the front here that are specifically about that, and I'm happy to sort of, if you want to come and have a look at those at the end, please do. But any stories you're reading, any TV programs you're watching, what are the characters feeling? What are they doing? How are they behaving as a result of how they're feeling? It's that discussion that I want to encourage. It's about finding opportunities to describe and label emotions that are raised in different activities, so through play. And play is such a fundamental part of learning about emotions and about emotional development. But through games that you might play as well. What's it like to lose? How do you feel when you lose? How do you feel when you win? How frustrating it is when you think you're going to win and then you lose. It's that kind of thing. It's about taking the time to talk and listen to each other, which I will talk a little bit more about as we go through. But really listening, holding back some of those immediate, instinctive problem solving that you might want to jump in with, that as a parent it can be really difficult to hold back on, but holding back. And then modelling yourself by talking about some of your own feelings. I was really frustrated when this happened, or I was really pleased, I was really happy, I was really excited, I was a bit confused, I was very upset by. And it's partly through that process of children seeing and hearing you talk about your emotions and seeing what that looks like that they begin to understand and recognise it for themselves. So, mum or dad, that's what they are like when they're angry. That's what angry looks like or angry feels like. And they begin to learn to recognise that themselves. The second stage then is encouraging the expression of emotions. So offering opportunities to discuss and express emotions in a safe and supportive environment so that children know it's okay to say how they feel. Listening with your full attention and responding calmly and compassionately. Putting the mobile or the iPad or whatever it is to one side and really listening and staying calm. And that staying calm can be one of the most challenging parts of this. And the compassion as well. It's all very good to listen, but if you're listening with sort of half an ear, it's not really listening. So it's about really fully listening, validating the emotional response and emotional expression rather than challenging it. So if if a child says, I felt really upset about that. Think how you would feel if you'd said that to somebody and they said, "Oh, you don't need to feel upset, don't be silly." It doesn't help. So communicating empathy, understanding by reflecting the emotions. So you, for example, say, "You seem really sad about that," and that's what we're going to look at in a moment with the task we're going to do. Think about that in a little bit more detail. And again, play, and we all need this at whatever age we are. You know, from children through teenagers, through to adults, we need opportunities to play, and that will obviously change, but it's such a vital part of being able to express ourselves. And then the third stage that, as I said, is I think the trickier part, but it is the part that is bringing in the long-term benefit of this. So, again, providing a safe, loving, affectionate, supportive relationship. And by providing that, which you do a lot of this unconsciously. I think many of you, all of you, will be doing most of these things unconsciously as part of being loving, caring, supportive parents. But it does no harm, I think, to highlight them and to think, you know, sometimes life gets in the way. We get distracted by things. It's difficult. We lose our train of what we're trying to do with our children, and to bring that back. The second point I put on that mud is modelling positive coping. So, for example, overcoming conflict by discussing a disagreement and making peace. You know, we all have disagreements with our partners. It's human nature. We all get angry. We all get upset. It is a natural human response. I would be more upset to meet a child who didn't get angry, or an adult who never got upset by anything, than to meet somebody who does get angry or upset. But I think the important thing here is about being able to work through that. And I think it's okay for children to see parents disagreeing, as long as that is done in a relatively civilised manner and that the parents can resolve it and the children can see it's okay to disagree if you can resolve that, if you can make peace and you are still providing a loving, supporting relationship for each other and for the children. So that is, again, perhaps easier said than done, but I think it's a really important part of helping children to learn some of these skills. I've talked about play again, which supports children in coping with frustration, let off steam, see different points of view, act out different situations, and encouraging cooperation. So much goes on when children are playing. Thinking about what children can change and what they can't change is a really valuable lesson as well. Thinking about different ways of helping them explore an experience. You know, how else could you think about this? What could you do that would help you feel a bit braver, or would help you feel a bit stronger? Or what could we do that would make you feel better able to cope? Relaxation techniques, whether that be a specific relaxation technique such as yoga or a meditation, or whether it's something like taking part in sport and really letting off steam and aggression on the football pitch or the hockey field or whatever it may be. And through those processes, through all these processes, helping children see mistakes and failures and disappointments as opportunities for learning. And then very, very importantly, encouraging healthy sleep, diet and exercise behaviours. As we heard at the beginning, you know, a child who is tired, a child who is hungry, you think about it yourself, it's almost impossible to learn. It's so hard for a child to come to school if they are tired and hungry and they're not able to learn. And if they can't learn academically, they're not learning socially and they're not developing those emotional skills as well. And understanding your child's temperament. So just like on the milestones sheet, I said every child is slightly different. You know, children will progress at their own pace, and there's things we can do to support them, but we can't rush them. And it's not a race, and it's not a competition, and all children are different. Siblings are different. If you have more than one child, you'll know that they can be very, very different people with very different needs in terms of their emotional support and what they need from you. So understanding that is really important part of this process. What I'd like to do to try and put this into practice and get your brains thinking a little bit on the other side of this sheet is an activity or a task that comes from the book How to Talk So Kids Will Listen and Listen So Kids Will Talk, which I imagine some of you have, some of you have read. I don't know if you did the tasks in it or flicked through them, but it is a really useful book. It's very easy to read and quite nice and clearly written. This is an activity about helping children to deal with their feelings. And very simply, I say simple, it's possibly not as simple as that, about acknowledging feelings. So there are several examples down the left-hand side of things a child might say, and your task is to think or to find a word that describes the feeling. What is that child feeling? And then to try and use that word in a statement that shows you understand the feeling. So it's not a question, it's not about giving advice, it's literally a statement to show that you understand what the feeling is. I've got some examples on the board because I think it's really important to try and develop as creative and wide a vocabulary for expressing emotions as possible. It's very easy to get stuck in happy, sad, angry. But actually, if you think about the human experience, it's so wide. And yes, it may be embarrassed for the first example here, but you may think it's something else. Parents often ask, does it matter if I get it wrong? And actually, I think if you do get it wrong, your child will let you know very clearly. And perhaps that opens up the conversation in a different way for you to say, okay, so you're not embarrassed, what are you? Or what was it? Or it gives an opportunity for some other open questions. But it shows that you are listening. It shows that you're trying to help them think about what the feeling is. Okay, let's come back together and see if we can see what you've come up with. So I'd like to punch that Michael on the nose. In the nose, on the nose. Any ideas?
Annoyed.
Annoyed, yeah.
Upset.
Yeah. B. Frustrated, yeah. Yeah. Anybody get anything else?
Angry.
Yeah, and see, angry is one there. Can anybody think of anything stronger than angry? Because angry, it's like, it's more than angry. You feel like you want to be really aggressive, yeah? Furious, full of rage, rageful, that quite works. But it's that kind of really trying to get the feeling.
I feel jealous.
Nervous, yeah, you might be nervous,
If
yeah.
she's a girl, maybe loving.
Potentially, yes. Yeah. You might have to be careful how you put that to somebody, but yes, potentially. If you know the child, yeah, I mean, to just take it from here is difficult. If it's your own child and they come and they say something like that, you probably know a little bit about the history with Michael. You probably know a little bit about the context. You might have an idea. It doesn't just come out of the blue like this. So you may be able to pull something else from it. But any of those things, yeah. Would anybody like to tell us how they put that into a statement? Anybody feeling brave enough to share that?
What happened to make you frustrated? Or originally I thought we should say, well, what did Michael do to make you frustrated? But then I thought, well, that's not fair because that's putting all the everything on Michael. So can we keep it more general?
Yeah.
I don't know.
Yeah, and try, I mean, like it says, try and avoid asking a question. Try and just acknowledge the feeling. Just saying something like, you're really frustrated by Michael today. And it's amazing what can come out of that. By saying something really open like that, you're giving the child permission to tell you more. I think often when we talk to children and young people, it's very easy to sort of shut down the conversation by asking why, or what did you do, or what did they do. And actually that sometimes can close them off. I mean, if you think of yourself, and when people ask you a why question, why did you do that? the instinct generally is actually to get quite defensive. And children and young people will do that quite instinctively. So by just reflecting the feeling, just acknowledging, oh, you feel really frustrated, or you're clearly really upset, or you're clearly angry about this, about whatever happened, or you're angry with Michael, you're allowing them to admit that feeling. Yeah, I'm really upset, angry, frustrated, confused, whatever it is. And see what comes next. And that's the bit about sort of biting your tongue and just holding back and giving them space. And that, I think, is the real challenge.
But just a question. She
Yeah.
said, I have written he must have done something to annoy you. Is that something putting bad on Michael, or is it like, is it something, because I just said he could have done something to annoy you, so it's just an open-end question. So do you think it's appropriate?
Well,
way?
I would stick at this point with just going with the feeling.
Okay.
Maybe you slightly rephrasing, he clearly annoyed you,
Okay. Yeah.
and just keeping it really, really open. As open as possible. It's a really quite tricky thing to do.
Yeah.
But if you think that word, you think, okay, the feeling is this, really just trying to keep that as the key to what you're saying.
Like, I guess that it depends on the child, of course.
Yeah.
But I would probably say you must be really angry at him. And then I said, what? And then I would always follow that up with what happened.
Yeah. Yeah.
And my son would tell me.
Yeah. But what happened is quite an open question, because you're not saying what did you do, what did Michael do. It keeps it quite open. So again, I would really encourage the keeping it open and keeping it as focused on the feeling as possible. Let's try another one. What about Mary invited me to a party but I don't know? What kind of feeling does that?
Nervous?
Confused, nervous,
Content and confused.
yeah.
Shy.
Shy, yeah. Yeah.
Guilty.
Possibly, yeah. Yeah.
Surprised.
Surprised, yeah. And again, if you know the context, you know the child, you know Mary. Maybe Mary is a terrifying child, and you know everybody's scared to go to her party. Maybe she's really nice, and you don't understand at all why your child doesn't want to go to her party. Again. Would anybody like to put that into a phrase?
Very smart. Smart.
It may be
Because maybe she wants to persuade me to let her go to the party.
again, you know your child.
Okay.
Okay, let's try one more then. Probably quite an appropriate one for many of you. The last one. Janie's moving away and she's my best friend.
Lonely.
Yeah, lonely,
Disappointed.
disappointed,
Sad.
yeah, sad. Yeah. Again, I mean, there's so many I think that could come up in there, and again, you probably very dependent on the context and the child. But you know, they may feel worried. They may feel confused about why their friends, particularly if they're quite small children, they may feel jealous that Janie's going off to do something new and exciting, and they're stuck wherever they are. They may be very worried. Sorry.
Scared.
Yeah, absolutely. So many. And I think by just acknowledging that feeling, saying something along the lines of, oh, I can hear you're really sad, I can hear you're really worried, I can hear you're scared that you're going to be lonely, or I can hear it's really confusing. You're just allowing them permission to feel that way. And if you think for yourself what it's like when somebody gives you permission to feel angry or furious or sad, it's a very powerful feeling. If you think of the flip side of that, when somebody sort of cuts you off and says, oh, don't be ridiculous, there's no need to feel like that, it makes you very defensive, and it really limits how you're able to deal with those feelings. So what I really want to stress here, and I want to move on, but I really want to stress here is about encouraging you to just take a moment, bite your tongue, what's the feeling, and just acknowledge the feeling. And if you have a moment's silence, it might feel uncomfortable, but try it. See what happens. See what your child comes up with after that. It may surprise you, and it gives you then an opportunity and a space to see what happens and to find the emotion in that and to help them then express it and then, as I say, to try and cope with it as well. I'm going to move on because I'm quite aware of the time, but certainly please do come back and ask some questions at the end if you need to. What I wanted to just think about is about when to be concerned. And I want to stress the idea of behaviour as communication. So often a child or young person won't necessarily tell you directly if something is wrong, but you will notice that their behaviour is different or their behaviour has changed. It might be different to how they usually behave. It might be very different to your expectations. It might be very different to their peers. So we need to be careful about comparing, but if something becomes noticeably different in terms of their behaviour, I think that is an important sign that they are trying to communicate something. Being moody, being irritable, being anxious, they're all normal human emotions and expressions, but it's when it starts to interfere with everyday functioning that it might indicate something more serious. It might indicate something that is quite temporary, quite transient, that just needs a little extra support and attention. But it might indicate something more severe or longer term that obviously needs a little bit, it needs more focus. So, I mean, I think this, as a very brief summary of when to be concerned, in terms of uncharacteristic or unusual behaviours for that child. So again, thinking about your child particularly, because your child may respond quite differently to another child. Something very uncharacteristic for your child may be very normal for another. So if you think about the child who's incredibly organised and suddenly becomes very disorganised, well, that might indicate that there's something going on. Another child being incredibly disorganised is just how they are, and that's what we're used to. Extreme behaviours that go on for longer than you think. So the young person who takes up running, but it doesn't just go once a week or something, goes 5 times a week for a couple of hours. That kind of really extreme behaviours. A child can become much more withdrawn, more aggressive, for example, or very disconnected from peers, family, school or other activities that they've previously enjoyed. For me, those are the sort of the warning signs that something is not right, that there's something that needs some attention and focus. And we'll come to think about what to do in a moment. But I just wanted to give you a brief summary of the 2 most common mental health concerns for children and young people, which are anxiety and depression, because early recognition is so important in providing good support. And these are both concerns that can be well supported, that people recover from, but they do need support. So anxiety is this feelings of fear, unrest, agitation, and insecurity. The symptoms there are perhaps more associated, they're not necessarily what you might see, but they're what the child might feel. As a parent, you might be more likely to see some of these behaviour changes, the child becoming perhaps more withdrawn, avoiding situations, for example, that make them feel anxious. There's a couple of examples. In terms of depression, the low mood, the loss of interest is a particular signal or symptom. Changes to sleep or appetite, low energy and poor concentration. Very clear signs when they're together, those different symptoms together. The website here, I will... Catherine, what sort of time? Will we all right for this?
10:15?
Yep, that's perfect. Okay, so I just wanted to show you this website because it's a really useful website for finding out a little bit more about what is depression, anxiety, different disorders. Obviously, it can't really see now, but the web address is stem4.org.uk. And if anybody wants me to write that down for them at the end, I can do. But it's It's a UK-based website that is aimed at teenagers particularly. So if you've got young children, it might not be very appropriate, but something to bear in mind. And because it's a UK-based website, the sources of support might not be terribly relevant, but the information about the kinds of support might be very useful. And it has some fantastic information about the 4 main mental health disorders in teenagers, which are anxiety, depression, eating disorders, self-harm and addiction. And it's got some really very valuable support and information for parents, for teachers, for friends, because that can often be a tricky one, that young people are worried about their friends, and for young people themselves. Okay, so it's STEM4 and the number 4.org.uk, but I'm very happy to write that down at the end. And I just show you that because I think being informed and having some information is a really valuable, and very powerful tool in helping you feel that you can cope and you can support your children. And that really is one of my main points in terms of what to do, is if you are struggling, if you are finding it difficult to cope, you are not going to be able to do as good a job as you would like to do in terms of supporting your children. So get some support, whether that be from family, friends or professionals, for yourself as part of supporting your children. But get informed, attend sessions like this morning, look up information if you're concerned, talk with your child and listen to them. And I go back to what we were talking about in terms of acknowledging the feelings. Give them a chance to talk. Hold your questions back. If necessary, write them all down on a piece of paper so you've got them out of your head, but hold them back and really just try with some of those very open questions, acknowledging the feelings, letting them talk, letting them feel what they're feeling, and try and help them to express it to you. But again, you can't push it. You can't say, tell me what you're feeling, and expect them to tell you, because actually, again, if you think for yourself, the more pressure somebody puts on you like that, the harder it is. Get support, get help, whether that be from school, and there is so much support available at school, whether it be your family doctor, whether the family health station here in Stavanger, whether it be through psychological services. But do get support, do ask the questions. There's really no shame in asking. I mean, if you think about, you would never ignore a physical problem, so don't ignore the psychological either. That's my main sort of question with that. Again, if anybody's got particular questions around this, I'm happy to answer them at the end, either in the group or individually. What I'd like to finish on is just to get you to think about what you're doing well, because the fact that you're here this morning shows that you are interested and you are caring. And what I would like to do is just take a moment to celebrate the good work you're doing in terms of supporting your children's emotional development. So I'd like you to think of something that you are doing well, either individually or as a family, to support your child, to support your children. And then I'd like you to think about one thing that you would like to focus on, one thing you think you could be doing a little bit differently, whether that be communication with your partner, whether it be resettling a few boundaries, whether it be just thinking about how you use technology at home, when you put your phone down or your iPad down, whatever it may be, just something that for you is a concern within your family about the way that you think about these things together. Okay, so one positive thing that you're doing well and something you'd like to focus on. Just have a couple of moments and then we're going to come with some questions. And you can just jot them down on the sheet if you want, or you can just make a mental note of things in your mind. Just have a couple of minutes. And if you want to tell the person next to what they are, please do. You'd rather not. No, but it's nice to think of something you're doing well and say it out loud, celebrate it.
good work that I do recognize it myself. Which part of this is going to teach me yourself? Oh,
Okay, let's come together again. Hopefully everybody could think of at least one thing that they were doing really well, and I'm sure many of you are doing lots of wonderful things with your children. But as humans, as parents, there is always something we think we need to focus on and we can do more of. Which brings me to the end, some time for questions. Before I take any questions, I will just say that there are there's so much information out there about how to support your children physically, and it can be overwhelming if you're just looking for a simple question. So please do, if this session raises things for you that you don't get a chance to ask now, or on the way home suddenly spring to mind, or this evening when you're trying to have that conversation with your child, please do get in touch. I'm more than happy to have a conversation on the phone or by email, or do get in touch with those questions or any feedback as well. On my website I have various different sources of support and websites and things that I think are very good, and on the Counselling Psychology Stavanger Facebook page I'm posting some things this month. It's the UK's Children's Mental Health Week, this week in fact. So all over February, all during February, I'm posting various links to articles and sources of support and information on children's mental health. So please do take a look at that as well if you're interested. Thank you.
Are there any questions? You have given us so many practical takeaways, even as I look at some of the ones on the list. There's just some nice strategies that I know that I'll take home, and I'm sure many of you will as well. Carol, did you have anything to add from the emotional well-being side? I just thought as we were listening to your presentation, it just aligned so beautifully with our philosophy here and a lot of the work that we're doing, particularly caring for that child. And making sure there's a supportive relationship there, particularly between teacher and students. So
I would maybe just say to be, just make sure you are aware of those pathways at school that you can get support. And if I start with the early childhood and the primary school, they have a teacher that they have most of the day, obviously, and that would be a direct first port of contact. You would then have, the primary school counsellor, who there's a dedicated primary school early childhood counsellor, and you also have your the principal of that section of the school as well. Then you move into the middle school, where for the first time they start having, and they move around and they have more than one teacher, but they have a dedicated child advocate, which is their homeroom teacher, who is responsible for their social and emotional well-being, as well as the middle school counsellor, the middle school principal, and each grade level has a pastoral team leader in each of those. So there are multiple avenues there in the middle. As you move into the high school, every single student has a homeroom teacher. That's an initial point of contact. There's a dedicated high school counsellor as well. And there is also a dedicated pastoral, emotional, social well-being team leader in 9, 10, 11 and 12. So just to make you so aware, if you think suddenly, I have a problem, where should I go? There are plenty of ways. And if you go to one person, if you come to me, I direct you, if I can't help, I direct you where you need to go. Yep. So always know that there are plenty of opportunities for help and support, not just for your child, but yourself as well. Okay.
And there's extension members of those teams too, because for example, Nurse Heather,
yes,
she's
of course,
very well connected with some of the organizations locally that help to support children who might have some additional learning or emotional needs. And she also has a list of resources in her office, including your contact information as well. So don't be shy about just popping in there and taking a look at some of the material that she has available as well.
Yeah, she is definitely an expert on, what other services there are in the Stavanger commune with regards if we need to take it further than just school. So she's definitely, and it's a luxury to have a full-time on-site nurse at our school. So again, use that wonderful opportunity as well.
Well, thank you, Jude.
Really?
And if, as I say, if you do have questions, please come.
I'm just going to do a quick plug for March next month, and I'll send out more information along with the date. We have an entrepreneur, a Norwegian entrepreneur, who has started a business. The English translation of it is The Value Factory. And she also goes around to schools and other venues and speaks about how to help praise children. How do we praise children? How can we make it meaningful? And so she'll be in here in March, and I'm really looking forward to that. But again, thank you so much. This was fantastic.
Thank you.